Product provided by Nintendo, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is a special game for me. And my story with the original Xenoblade X is a long and weird one. It started as a game that I picked up because I just wanted something to play on my Wii U, but I never would have expected to have fallen in love with it so much, while really not understanding most of the actual mechanics and just how the game works. But what I fell in love with was the world of Mira and the creativity and imagination that oozed out of every orifice and pore of that game. And the images of Oblivia, Noctilum, and especially Primordia would stick with me for years to come. Even though I never actually beat the game when it first came out all those years ago, I would never forget the sheer grandeur and majesty of Mira. And after fully falling in love with the series of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 1 Definitive Edition, and then 3, I returned to the world of Mira on the Wii U version in the hopes of actually completing it for myself, which I did. And I proceeded to fall in love with the game all over again. All that creativity and imagination that stuck in my mind for all those years didn't fade away, and it wasn't just nostalgia. There was just something about Xenoblade X that was truly special to me. And I hoped in my heart of hearts that one day we would see Monolith pick up the reins of Xenoblade X once more, to bring it into the modern day. So when they announced Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, you can bet and believe that I was absolutely enthralled and excited at the prospect of returning to Mira, with updated visuals and even an expanded storyline that would continue off the massive cliffhanger ending of Chapter 12. I was not only on board, I was fully invested. I was steering the ship. Call me captain. But then something interesting, something I didn't expect to happen, occurred when I played Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. I fell in love with the game even more. Even elements that I once criticized and viewed to be weak points of the series, but also the game itself, I just fell in love with. The pacing of the first half of the story, the gameplay, mechanics that I once ignored, I took care and time to actually learn and become relatively decent at. And everything started to click. You pair all that alongside the changes they made for Definitive Edition for Xenoblade Chronicles X. And as a comprehensive experience, I'm of the firm belief that Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is not only one of the best games on the Switch, for me, it is one of my favorite games ever created. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and let's talk about Monolith's return to Mira. Now, I am right near the end of Chapter 13, the new story. And believe you me, Chapter 13 deserves not just a video, but probably multiple videos, all on its own. There is a lot to unpack there and a lot that I love. I love every element of it pretty much. But that glaze session will be tabled for another day. I want to talk about the meat and potatoes of Xenoblade X, the world of Mira, the gameplay, the story, the world building. Because those elements will not change, at least in terms of my perspective on them, with the ending that I've still left to play when it comes to Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. I will say this up front and immediately. My preference for the future direction of not only Xenoblade X, but also Xenoblade Chronicles as an IP, is to embrace the gameplay formula and loop from X. What was once bogged down in poor UI, poor communication, uneven pacing, and especially pacing in the early game, when you first unlock a new class, that felt just so absolutely agonizingly slow, Definitive Edition rectifies almost entirely. Better UI, not perfect, but much better. Far better communication of information to the player, again, not perfect, but infinitely better than the original. And with the simple inclusion of a new mechanic called Quick Cooldown, Quick Recharge, I can never remember that thing's name, but the entire flow of the game changed. And sure, the game may have become easier because of its inclusion, where you hit the Y button, and if even an art is on cooldown, you can immediately use it with its secondary effect. But it is such a brilliant mechanic that irons out pretty much every issue that I had, not only with Xenoblade X's early game pacing, but every Xenoblade game's pacing, where you can have just these awkward stretches of time where you have nothing to press and all of your arts are on cooldown. Quick cooldown just remedies all of that. And it is a mechanic that I think Xenoblade should embrace for the future, if it's going to retain this gameplay style. And you pair that alongside Overdrive, which replaces the chain attack system known for Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, with the Overdrive mechanic, where the goal is to keep Overdrive going by building more TP to spend to extend the time timer for overdrive to make your arts hit even harder, for them to come off cooldown even faster. And the pace of Xenoblade X and the combat, in my opinion, is one of its greatest strengths. Xenoblade X embraces being a video game, but especially an RPG. There's loads to customize and loads to learn, and while the game doesn't do a great job all the time of teaching people how to play and learn and master all of its various systems, if you do go out of your way to learn these various mechanics, you get a lot out of the game, and it just becomes so much more fun and interesting to build your character, get better gear, upgrade your character, and also find a build that you just simply find fun. Being able to unlock various different classes, and when you max them out, you can retain those weapons to mix and match with other classes, while also mixing and matching various skills and the arts associated with those weapon archetypes. There's just so much creativity and variety in this game. So if you're someone like me that likes to find the build they like and stick with it, you can do that. But if you're someone who likes to experiment and try out different things, the game gives you plenty of opportunity to do just that. If you want to refund the points you spend to upgrade various arts and skills so you can put them into something else, you are absolutely able at any time to do that, at least when you're outside of combat. And on top of all of that, the game dares to do what few games are able to do correctly or in an enjoyable manner, in my opinion. Let's talk about skills. Let's talk about giant freaking robots. I think one of the reasons I am head over heels when it comes to Xenoblade X is because in so many other games, when there's something that is equally cool as, say, a skill, or something that has so much potential to be awesome and cool that you want to sink your teeth in and just enjoy and savor, you can only utilize a really cool feature or gameplay mechanic for a short burst of time or in only a few sections of the game, or when you're actually utilizing that thing, it can feel really limited. I think a great example of this is the final boss of Torn of the Golden Country in Xenoblade 2, where there is a giant robot that is part of the mechanic of that fight, but all you're really doing is building up a bar to hit a button so that it can do a pre-rendered cutscene for you. It's cool by itself, don't get me wrong, but I think most of us, at least if you're of my way of thinking, will admit that it's far cooler to be able to pilot the robot and to feel like I'm actually in a mecha anime, and that's what Xenoblade X is able to do. When you unlock this skill, it's not just for a short burst of time. It doesn't feel limited. It feels like a breath of fresh air that allows you to explore and interface with Mira in ways you never could before. It's one of the reasons I was actually really disappointed with the interlink mechanic of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Because to me, as someone who had played Xenoblade X before, it just felt like a scuffed skill mechanic. One with far more limitations and wasn't as cool or experimental or as liberating or even as powerful as the skill mechanic in terms of how it feels to play. And then being able to unlock flying with scales, and having every limiter, every way the game tried to rein you in and give you any rails to guide your experience, they just become shattered and melted and turned into whatever. No, they're turned into a giant off-ramp for you to get airtime, while also forming the wind beneath your wings. The limitations of the game's early stages almost become an accelerator for the freedom the game gives you in its later stages. And it's absolutely brilliant for doing that. Not only can you fight in combat with skills, not only can you customize the skills, not only can you give your party members various skills and also customize them in terms of the weapon loadout they have equipped, in terms of the gear they have equipped, in terms of the coloration of the skill, in terms of the name of the skill. Not only can you fight with them, you can explore the world of Mira in various stages. You go from running around the world on foot and experiencing Mira in all of its grandeur and majesty. Then you run around the world in the cockpit of a giant robot, being able to jump farther and move faster than you ever could before. And it changes your entire perspective of the world and the size of it. And then you can fly. Then you can fly. Xenoblade X is a game of few limitations, at least in terms of what it feels like. And in my opinion, like I said before, it is one of my favorite games of all time, but even the Wii U version was, and this version, Definitive Edition, is even better. And I know I'm really hopping on this scale issue in particular, but I think it's such an important microcosm of why Xenoblade X is so well beloved by so many at this point. The cool moments don't feel like gimmicks, they don't feel like one-off scenarios that are just meant to give you a burst of adrenaline. When the game does something cool, it is is not only really cool, first of all, but also it's a game changer, and it's something that largely sticks with you for the entirety of the experience. I think Xenoblade X is one of the best examples of how to incorporate a giant robot into a game that we have ever seen. Because while the movement can be a little bit clunky on occasion, right? Maybe you miss the landing point, or you get out and you fall off the cliff, and it can be a little frustrating, right? It's fine to admit. But I think the pros and the benefits of the skill system and the game on the whole far outweigh any issues the game has. Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, in my opinion, is special. And it's not just because of the skill mechanic, it's the world itself. Mira is an absolutely captivating world. One of my favorites I have ever seen in a video game. And arguably, probably my favorite in-game world that I've ever seen. At least top 3. It's big, colorful, varied, and vibrant, and lovely. And it's my favorite kind of sci-fi. Grand and mysterious, but also, when you look at it, everywhere you look is a potential screenshot. Everywhere you look is an image with more than 1,000 words. You just want to dive into it and explore it, and that's the beauty of Mira. And the way they build this world is not only through the gameplay being really cool and varied, with giant robots and giant cool looking monster design that is far and away the best monster design in the entire series. I'm going to fight on that issue. But also, so much of this story is dedicated to world building. Xenoblade X operates under a fundamental principle. If you can see it, you can go to it. You may not be able to go to it immediately, but if you do see it, at some point in the game, you will be able to go there. And that works in conjunction with the skill mechanic, because not only is piloting a giant robot arguably the coolest thing you can do in a video game, but also, it lets you go to all these different places, and they build the world not only in terms of the characters that populate it, but also in a combination of side content and main story, paired with mystery and foreshadowing. They build up the world of Mira. Humanity's desperate grasp onto any morsel of hope to try and find a new home. At least personally, I fell in love with every character in this game, for the most part. And a lot of the side characters and side quests this game has you go under, I made an entire video about why I love the side quests in this game. They tell unique and interesting and compelling stories that flesh out not only characters but parts of the world as well, and they're not afraid to tie certain quest lines together. It may come off a bit intimidating initially with all the prereqs some later quests may require, but I view that to be a positive thing because the world feels interconnected and these storylines come together. And if you do a storyline with a time traveler who's an absolute genius, maybe later on in another side quest chain, you may require that same genius to aid you in your other adventures. And the way this game is able to intertwine these stories, it makes the world feel connected. It makes all the efforts you put in not only to develop the main story through progression in the main story quests or individual quest lines, it makes everything feel tied together. The game is not afraid to have moments of levity, it's not afraid to have moments of lightheartedness, it's not afraid to have slow moments of just character development, showcasing various elements of a character. If you only view characters from one perspective, and that perspective being imminent tragedy, then I tend to find characters can often feel one-dimensional and boring and stale, because you don't see them in any other atmosphere. You don't see how those characters may react to moments of peace and calm and tranquility. You have to have a balance, you have to have a mix. And that's what Xenoblade X hits so well in my opinion, striking that balance, that mix. The affinity quest can range from being rather basic and kind of one-dimensional to being really emotional and interesting, and turning characters that I once was disinterested with, and turning them into characters that I'm like, I really care about these characters, and they borderline feel like main party member characters, with the amount of interesting and fun and also emotionally gripping development that those characters receive. Paired alongside heart-to-hearts that may just offer a new perspective on how that character operates in their day-to-day, and it makes the cast of characters in Xenoblade X feel multi-dimensional and interesting and memorable. But also, because of all those previous reasons I just talked about, it makes me more excited to do side content. I still have a lot to do after I beat Chapter 13. There's a lot of different stories and quest lines that I have not done yet that I absolutely want to do. That is the joy, that is the brilliance of Xenoblade Chronicles X. It gives you this world and does a damn good job of making you fall in love with it, but also the characters that need to find their own way within that world. And it can be a bit awkward at times, and sometimes the execution of various scenes and the music choices of certain scenes can feel a bit awkward or weird, as if they don't fit. And while that may be a con to some people, I get it, but to me, it's part of the charm of Xenoblade Chronicles X. And I think I could do an entire video on the music alone, and that video almost certainly will come, but let's just briefly address it right now. It's my favorite soundtrack in all of Xenoblade, and arguably all of gaming. I love it from top to bottom, and I particularly adore the slow songs, the piano-led songs that this game has. The way can be awkwardly used in scenes that really feel as if they don't fit with the drama and emotion of the way, but it's still one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song in the entire franchise. I love it so much. Uncontrollable, when it plays, it just gets me hyped, and I love pretty much every song that is in this list. I have a penchant for music that has a lot of lyrics in it. Generally speaking, if you provide me songs with lyrics and without lyrics, most of the time I'm going to enjoy the songs with lyrics more than those without. Xenoblade X is a soundtrack that is heavy on music that has a lot of lyrics in it, and that's possibly one of the reasons that I love the soundtrack so much, but it's also just the beauty of Sawano's music. There's a reason he is so renowned nowadays, and I tend to find a lot of the music in this game just adds to the vibe of Xenoblade X and Mira on the whole. Don't Worry being the song that is played for flying, it's a song that when you listen to it, it just feels freeing and liberating. It's a great song choice for when you're able to fly, and that's just one little example of the brilliance of this soundtrack in my opinion. It just has a bunch of great vibes to it. Xenoblade X, and I've talked about this before, is a game where you get a lot more out of it if you're willing to put a lot into it. You can play this game with a very surface level understanding and still enjoy yourself, but if you're willing to dive beneath the surface, to read a few item descriptions possibly, do a few of the side quest chains, open yourself up and be willing to experiment and try things that may be out of your comfort zone, you may find the game to be more fun and enjoyable, and also more enthralling. It's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, but no game is perfect. But for me, Xenoblade Chronicles X is one of the best examples of how to do an open world game correctly, because it doesn't view the open world as just a marketing buzzword to go around. The open world isn't a glorified loading screen in between pieces of actual content that you enjoy. The world itself of Xenoblade X, the world of Mira, is the content. It is the story, alongside the tale of humanity, just trying to find their place on Mira. That is the story, that is the game. Whether you're exploring the world to put down various data probes, experimenting with Frontier Nav, doing various quests, taking on various tyrants, salvaging various materials from across the world, collecting things for the Collectopedia. There's so much the game lets you do to just flesh out your understanding of not only Xenoblade X, but the world of Mira. And I've talked about this phenomenon with Xenoblade X before, but I think it's one of its greatest strengths, and that is its pacing. The early game is broken up in such a way to where a larger chunk of its overall pie, like imagine if the entire experience of like each third of the game can be shown as a pie. A bigger slice of that pie for the initial beginnings of it is based around exploration, with a little bit of the pie left over for RPG elements. And then when you get to the mid-game, those slices are about 50-50. You've explored a significant chunk of Mira by that point, but you probably have a skill now, so while there's still a lot of exploring to do and also re-exploring, around that point in the time, you probably care more about the RPG elements in the game and building up your character, getting levels, experimenting with different arts. You might have a set build you're going for, so those RPG elements become a bit more important, alongside customizing your skill. And then when you get to the late game, after you've gotten flying and you've fully explored the world, there's still some exploration to be done, for sure, but now a significant chunk of that pie is dedicated to those RPG elements. What this brilliant game design does is keep you on your toes and keep the experience feeling fresh and new, but also familiar at the same time. So it always feels like Xenoblade X, just your priorities and how you interface with Xenoblade X changes as the game goes on. So it doesn't feel stagnant and dull and boring, it shifts its priorities. Never fully getting rid of or fully becoming any one thing, just different ratios. And if there's one big critique I could still level at Xenoblade X, it would be the same issue that I have with a lot of Xenoblade Chronicles' overall gameplay design, and that is too much of a focus on the gameplay experience is on what you can do as the player instead of what the enemy can do as an enemy. There are moments in this series that I think they do strike a decent balance. I think Xenoblade 2, Bringer of Chaos difficulty, is a decent example of this, where enemies have mechanics that you have to pay attention to and react to. While Xenoblade X has the appendage system and you can like break various appendages if you so choose to limit what abilities the enemy can do, sure, that is a good step in the right direction in my opinion. opinion. However, I don't think it goes far enough. And especially later in the game, if you know how to build and you know how to actually play Xenoblade X halfway decently, the game largely feels like a cakewalk outside of super bosses. And you're not really paying attention to what the enemy themselves can do, you're just trying to optimize what you can do to beat the enemy even quicker. A direction shift I would like to see for Xenoblade Chronicles going into the future is having even more emphasis on what enemies can do to make them feel more memorable. So the best sense of enemy variety we get in the game is not just from the visuals of the enemy, but also the mechanics of the enemy. I think that can also lead to better boss design later on, even though, like, let's be fair here, I am kind of wildly over-leveled here. But the point still largely stands even if you're roughly equivalent to the enemy. If you know what you're doing, the game largely becomes a cakewalk, and enemy mechanics aren't really, like, the big important element. It's just, can you optimize what you do? I would love to see the enemies feel a bit more varied and important in terms of what they do. And sure, while Xenoblade X can have some awkward pacing from time to time, and have some awkward execution in terms of song selection, and while it's absolutely lovely not to have fall damage and to be able to run so quickly and to jump so high, sure, navigation and platforming in the game can be rather awkward from time to time. I think the pros vastly outweigh the cons of Xenoblade X. And I hope I was able to properly explain in this video why I love Xenoblade X so much, and why no matter how many times I play this game, every time I play it, I feel as if I'm playing it for the very first time all over again. Very few games can have that effect on me, and Xenoblade X, with Definitive Edition, not only is the best version of Xenoblade X in my opinion, with far better UI design, beautiful visuals alongside it as well, and an actual audio slider so I can balance the audio, thank God. Well, I just simply love Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Definitive Edition made me fall in love with it even more. With that, I'll call the video there for the day. Please leave a comment down below with your favorite element of Xenoblade Chronicles X, or your favorite moment or memory of the game. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and to hear your stories. Stay safe, have a great day, please leave a like and subscribe, it really helps channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Now for chapter 13, we're gonna go deep. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.